We are here in the Amida Sutra talking about Anatta Pandika. Anatta Pandika was a very prominent supporter of Buddhism, and he made such a huge contributions that even after thousands of years, that people still talk about him. So you look at history, of all the prominent supporters, it's usually in religions that their legacy survives. Even the royalty, you don't hear much about them, but you do hear about them in religious teachings. So religion has a way of preserving one's legacy, and that's why it's important and it has survived through generations. So Anatta Pandika was a sponsor or he's a supporter of Buddhism, and he was a sage. He was able to learn Buddhism and enter to become a sage. And so let's talk a little bit more about him. We have already talked about the qualities that made him a sage, 圣人, right? Thánh nhân. The first one to enter to be a sage, to ru liu, right? Nhập lưu. It's like a stream. Once you enter a stream, you can never fall back. And so the first thing that you become a sage is to eliminate self-view. And we talked about self-view, where we believe that this body is permanent, this body lasts forever. So whatever we do, we always put this body at the center, or ourselves at the center of the conversation, of our view. And that leads to dissatisfaction, because when you depend on this body for happiness, it's almost guaranteed that you are going to face suffering, because this body will change. And therefore, by depending on this body, there is no way but to avoid, you cannot avoid suffering. So that's the first thing, is once become a sage, is that you don't have suffering. And that is because of eliminating self-view. So that's the first thing that we talked about last time. So that was just a review. So the second thing that a person becomes a sage is to avoid clinging to rites and rituals, right? 戒取见, 有一途经. That's the second one. And what this is saying is that you cannot simply just go through the motion and become a sage. It requires an active participation, a change in your part. You cannot just follow rigid moralism, rely on God for non-causal delivery. So those things you cannot simply do and then become a sage. It's not like you eat and then your stomach will take care of it. The digestion will take care of it automatically. That may be true for the body, but in terms of raising your level of consciousness, 心识, tâm thức, you have to actively change it, transform your consciousness. It's not like set and forget kind of thing, but you have to actively be part of it. So only through the practice of the Noble Eightfold Path, 八正道, 八真道, will you be able to transform yourself. So what this here, the second part is telling us, is that one cannot blindly practice, even with diligent efforts, 精进, 等等. Even if you put in a lot of effort, you cannot become a sage without, if you continue to, you practice it blindly, you believe in it blindly. So what this means is that we have to take an active part of it. And one cannot expect spiritual liberation, 解脱, right, 解脱, if one just blindly believes in the practice without knowing what is it that one is practicing. You cannot pay somebody in authority, somebody who is a priest or a monk in authority, a religious authority, to cultivate for you, to do repentance for you, 忏悔, 三悔, to do repentance for you. But our cultivation is only effective if it leads to a change in behavior. So you can donate a lot of money, but it does not mean that you will be able to enter the stream. That's why in the to be a human being, you can just observe the simple 5 precepts. to become like a heaven being, you need to add 3 more, which is greed, anger, and delusion. You need to eliminate all those 3 things, tan, chen, ci, tam, seng, si. So it requires a more active part in changing our consciousness, because we can donate a lot of money, but behind that, we have not eliminated greed, then we will not be able to achieve the level of the heavens. So it requires more. So that's just heaven, but if you want to be liberated to become a sage, then it requires even more active part in the cultivation. So rite and rituals like 法会, 法会, those things can only provide a positive condition, a positive environment, but you yourself must take an active part in your own spiritual development, right? We have to take care of our own spiritual development. We cannot have somebody else do that for us. So what this means is that rites and rituals, right? All the rites and rituals here, 法会 and all the different ceremonies, they are very positive, but they are only the conditions for us to be positive and to maintain positive. They are not ends to, they are not ends to in themselves. They are only means to an end, 方便, phương tiện. They are only means to an end. They're not the end in themselves, okay? So rite and rituals are good until they become a barrier, 障碍, 阻礙, until they become a barrier to our spiritual liberation, 解脱, 解脱. So they're good, they're very joyful, but they are only good as they are giving us a positive environment, a positive condition, but eventually they become a barrier, 障礙, 阻礙. What that means is that it becomes a barrier when we completely rely on it, when we become complacent, and we stop thinking for ourselves, we stop thinking of what it means to go through the ceremony, when we only end up going through the motion. No, in other words, one has lost the meaning of the practice, 形式, like only on hình thức, only on the surface that we are practicing, because we are not changing our consciousness. We have not transformed our thinking, our consciousness to another level. And some people will say, well, I pray to the Buddha every day, but how comes that I still encounter hardships? How come I still get sick? Where are the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas when I need them? So that is not understanding Buddhism. In other words, that person has turned his practice into a negotiating tactic with the Buddhas, right? I do this, you do this for me. But that's not what it is. We're doing this for ourselves, not for the Buddha. The Buddhas are there to help us. And they are very intelligent. They are very, even though they are very compassionate, full of loving kindness, but they will not be fooled by our emotional, our emotional bargaining, where we cannot cry in front of them and they will respond. They are very wise, so they know exactly what we need. Sometimes we have to go through hardships, and they will allow us to go through hardships, but they know that at the end, it's good for us. Just like you as parents, you know that when you deny a child a toy, the child will be crying, but you know that that crying is not going to hurt the child, but the child will learn that lesson later. So you allow that child to cry, even though at that moment the child may seems like he is in suffering, but that suffering is very childish, very ridiculous. It's not suffering at all, right? So the hardships that we go through, it may seem like a burden, it may seem like a lot to us, but the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are smiling because this is nothing, because they know that once we get over the hardships, we will gain even more. And that's why they're smiling. They are not fooled by our crying. The Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are everywhere, and they are always with us. We just don't recognize them. And we think that they are nice, and therefore we think that they should be kind to us. in other words, we become attached to the form, 直相. You'll be attached to the form, like giác tướng. We think that, oh, they are very kind, and so therefore they should always be nice to us. But we are confused between being nice and loving kindness. Being nice is emotionally based, whereas Buddha's loving kindness is wisdom based. And like I said, sometimes they will allow us to go through the suffering so that we can learn and grow. Right? That's how it is. We learn through our experience. So that suffering, that pain is very healthy, spiritually speaking, if we recognize it. So that's why the Buddha doesn't appear to interfere with our experience, because they want to see us grow. That's true compassion. When you see somebody grow and develop and become successful, that's true compassion. But if you are being nice to somebody so that they become emotionally attached to you, so that you have control of them, then that's not being nice at all, right? That's very evil. But the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are wise and they're not evil. They will be nice to us, be kind to us when we need it. But if they know that we can handle the situation, the hardships, the suffering, then they will allow us to handle so that we can grow. Because if they continue to do things for us, then where are our efforts? We will not be able to change our consciousness. And that's why, even though we may not see them, it is very difficult to recognize them, because you have to see the intentions behind the actions. And it's not on the surface that we can easily see. So what makes rites and rituals, 法会, this or well, I should say 戒, right? The word that translates here is 戒. What makes giới, what makes rites and rituals a fetter is that is the wrong belief that any kind of observance, 持戒, 止giới, is in and by itself sufficient for even conducive to attainment of enlightenment. In other words, you cannot just observe the precepts without thinking about it, what you're doing, without being flexible in terms of how to wisely observe the precepts. 持戒, 止giới. For example, let's say no lying. Let's say, okay, well, no lying, I observe that precept very strictly. Whatever I do, I don't lie. By saying that, that person may not understand the meaning of observing no lying precept. For example, if somebody comes to you and asks about how they look, they just bought a new dress, and they're very proud of it, but you say, that dress looks so ugly on you, then you hurt that person's feeling. You say, it is true that that dress doesn't look nice on that person, but we don't have to be so blatantly straightforward. We can be clever about our words. Even though, yes, you spoke the truth, that dress really looked ugly on that person. But by saying that, it doesn't mean you are observing the no lying precept. Does it make sense? So when we become so rigid in our observing of the precepts, then we become trapped. We're afraid to do anything. We're afraid to interact with people because we don't know how to handle. So even though precepts, 戒, giới, precepts are good, but if we don't understand why we're observing the precepts, then it becomes a fetter, becomes obstructions, 障碍, 阻碍. So this second quality here that we should understand is that by precepts, 戒, giới, by precepts alone, or even by samadhi, samadhi, which is meditation, 禅定, by precepts or meditation alone, we cannot achieve enlightenment. That's what it's saying. It's telling here is that just by observing the precepts, that there is no guarantee that we can achieve enlightenment. But it is only by prajna, border, prajna, which is wisdom, only by wisdom based upon precepts and meditation, meaning that the precepts and meditation that we practice will have to lead us to wisdom in order to achieve liberation, spiritual liberation. Right? So observing the precepts alone, just sitting in meditation, there is no guarantee that we can achieve enlightenment. Observing the precepts can lead to karmic rewards, like 福报, right? It can lead you to karmic rewards, but if we are not careful, then it leads to enjoyment and spiritual corruption, where we forget about spiritual liberation. All we care about is how to enjoy a good life more and more. So we now have forgotten about our spiritual liberation, which is spiritual corruption in a sense. Samadhi, saimoti, tamadi. Meditation can lead us to meditative bliss. But if we are stuck there, then we are not growing, because we want to preserve that meditative bliss forever. Therefore, we stop growing. We stop transforming our consciousness. And even eventually retrogression, which is 退转, 推进. We even slide back to the mundane state of being, to want to enjoy the worldly pleasures. So it's really wisdom, it's really wisdom that can lead us to enlightenment and liberation by uprooting selfish craving for selfish enjoyment. When we practice, when we observe the precepts, there is still an element of selfishness, because we want to have a secure life, we want to be healthy, we want to be happy. So it's all about ourselves, me. So there's still an element of selfishness. That's why it does not lead to liberation. So same thing with samadhi, saimoti, tamadi. That meditative bliss is very wonderful. It's very positive, but it does not lead to liberation, because we become stuck in that selfish craving for more meditative bliss, 禅悦, right? Meditative bliss. And all this with the rites and rituals, with 法会, 法会, puja, that's what it's called, puja. It's very positive. Sometimes even you go to like a retreat, 佛七 or 佛特, or you chant Amitabha for 7 days, right? It's wonderful. And you feel very blissful, and sometimes even carefree, like as if you are on top of the world. And you feel quite insulated, quite apart, quite separated from all the troubles. And you feel quite different than your regular life in a different way, in a very positive way, very, very inspiring, very positive. But the problem is that it doesn't last long. After your 7-day retreat, you return to the world, your old life, and then there you are again, being back to your old self. So meditation alone does not last. The reason is because it is based on jhana experience, which is 禅定. This is only a jhana experience and not insight. It does not lead to wisdom. You don't see why you have the meditative bliss, and you don't see the impermanence of the meditative bliss. Therefore, you become attached to the meditative bliss, 禅悦, 品瑜, which is, so when you become attached to it, that means you don't see impermanence, and then you're being fooled by it. So when you don't see it and it changes, it interrupts you, it messes you up, and therefore it leads to dissatisfaction, 苦, because it's no longer there anymore. You expect it to be there all the time, but now it's no longer there, because by nature it is 无常, by nature it is impermanent, like water, right? But that experience can last for a few days or even a few weeks, but usually afterwards it disappears. And that's because it's not based on wisdom. It does not lead us to insight, wisdom. So ritual here, in a sense of symbolical and spiritual significant acts, 法会, 法会, ritual is by far from being condemned in Buddhism, meaning that it is good. We're not saying rituals are not good. Rituals are very good, very positive. And they are part of all schools, Buddhist schools, Theravada and Mahayana, right? Nanchuan, Beichuan, Namjing, Bakjing. All the different Buddhist schools have rituals as part of their heritage. And even in Vajrayana, Mizong, Magdong, ritual plays an important part, as well as ceremonies. So puja, Fahui, those Dharma assemblies are very positive because they allow you to express your emotions, right? When you chant, and when you express yourself through singing, it's very positive. It allows you to express your emotion. So there is joy when you find the right emotions for your intention, right? When you can express something that matches your intention through words or through action, it is very joyful. When you can say what is in your mind and it's positive, it's very joyful. When you do something to help somebody and your intention is to help somebody, it is very joyful. For example, if you take care of your child and by helping your child, for example, with homework or whatever, right, and your child feels happy, then that help is consistent with what your objective is, to help that child become successful. So that action, that encouragement, the words of encouragement match your intention, therefore it's joy. So when in a Dhamma assembly and we have reverence for the Buddha and we can express through our singing, it is very positive. If there is no emotion, like we don't feel anything, then there is no energy and there is no drive. And whatever we do may not be very well done. The work that we do will not be well done. And we will have no progress. And we may even have mistakes in our deeds, the things that we do. So emotion is very important. Emotion allows us to move forward. It allows us to put in our best without feeling tired. That's why emotion is very important part of the spiritual life. So it is absolutely important that we bring our positive and healthy emotions out, because it allows us to resonate with the higher powers, the positivity, if you will. So the question here is, if it is so important, why is it that our emotional energy is not involved all the time? We feel tired. We don't feel motivated. We feel like we have lost interest. Why? Emotion is there certainly in us somewhere, right? It's in us somewhere. But why is it that it is not available to us? Why is it that we don't have that aspiration all the time? But sometimes we even lose interest in what we think is supposedly the most important thing in our lives, spiritual liberation, 解脱, right? 解脱. That spiritual liberation is so important, but sometimes we don't have the energy to continue the momentum. Why is that? There are two reasons. One is external and internal constraints. Or you can look at it from the social and physiological limitations. So one is external, the other is internal. One is society, the other one is because of having this body. That is a limitation. And that's why it is difficult for us to express our emotions, to have more emotional energies. But these limitations here are necessary to maintain social order and even to save ourselves from mental destruction. So there are limitations. From society, restrictions from society, and restriction because of this biological body that we have. Those limitations are necessary, but they become obstructions, 障碍, 阻碍, because we don't know how to use them. First, social factors, social limitations. In today's civilized society, we live in a civilized society. We are not allowed to express our crude feelings and emotions. For example, if you feel so mad, you get so angry, and you feel like killing somebody, it doesn't mean that you are at liberty to kill, right? Because we are civilized beings. We don't, slap people in the face because we get angry, or we yell at somebody, but we talk through it, right? That's civilization, correct? So living in a civilized society, it constrains our emotions. Does it make sense? All right, so that's one. And even if and so that's negative side, but on the positive side, even if you're very positive and you want to help somebody in a civilized society, and especially there's so many unknowns around us, it doesn't mean that we can go out and help people, because it may not be safe to do so. I've heard of a story about this person who was in New York, supposedly a famous actor or a director, and he was helping somebody sitting on the street begging for some money, and he pulled out his wallet, and next thing he knew, he was stabbed because that supposedly a beggar, what he thought was a beggar, was a thief, a robber. So, in a situation like that, you don't want to put yourself in harm's way. So, or somebody or a person getting sued for helping somebody who has fallen, because he was accused of pushing that person. So it looked like he was reaching down to help that person, but from somebody else's view, he was pushing somebody. So he ended up being sued, right? So you're trying to help somebody, you're trying to do some good deeds, but then you get sued, and so we sometimes put ourselves in difficult situation because we live in a civilized society where many things can happen. I was with friends in LA downtown passing out gifts one Christmas. That was one Christmas season to the homeless in LA downtown. And in a mindset, when you're giving out, you want to give your gifts out to everybody. So in your mind, or in my mind at least, I saw everybody as a homeless person, right? So I started giving out. But then there was a person passing by, and I gave my gift to him. He said, "Oh, no, thanks. I'm not a homeless person. He just happened to be passing by." So in a way, I offended him by thinking that he was a homeless person. So even I was doing good deeds, but I was not being very careful. So I ended up offending him. But luckily, he didn't feel so offended to hit me in the nose. So what we want is emotional refinement, not control or suppression. We don't want to suppress our emotions. Even though, yes, there may be uncertainty in helping people and you could put yourself in harm's way, but it doesn't mean that we should stop helping people, right? We don't want to suppress our positive emotions. Loving kindness, those things, those feelings are very positive, and we don't want to suppress our emotions. But what we want is communication and quality, contact with people, right? We want that exchange to be healthy, to help us grow as human beings, right? When we interact with somebody, we are opening ourselves up because we are exchanging, right? When we say, "Hi, how are you?" So we're being friendly. Or you could say, "Oh, good morning," and that person can say, "What's so good about this morning?" Right? So you're opening yourself up for criticism. But just because of that possibility doesn't mean that we should, not say hi to everybody, right? So we should maintain that positivity, but knowing that, yes, there is a chance that somebody could attack you. But so we don't want to suppress our feelings. But what we want is real communication. We want to establish that quality contact with other human beings. So one's emotions are likely to be blocked because it's so easy to say, "You know what, forget you. I'm just going to keep it to myself. That is when we are blocking our emotions. We don't want to share what's in our heart with other people because we're afraid of being attacked. Does it make sense? So that's one. But on the other hand, once unblocked emotions, where we can now let go of your emotions freely, tend to be negative if there is no satisfactory communication with other people. Meaning that when you interact with people and you don't understand each other and you don't know how to express what's in your heart, then it leads to negativity. So one is that you just shut yourself out. You don't want to talk to anybody anymore because you're afraid of being hurt. Second is that you open yourself up, but it is all negative because you are trying to protect yourself. Does it make sense? So that's when we have no real communication with other people, that it leads to one, blocked emotions, where we don't want to talk to anybody, want to keep within ourselves. Or two is negativity, when we open ourselves up. It's all about defense, about blocking other people from attacking us. So therefore, it is all negative emotions. Does it make sense? So this is why a spiritual community, like the one that we have here, with those aspire for our same common goals, allows us to maintain the proper human contact, allows us to exchange, to have real communication, because there's really no real threat, right? We are here, and there's no reason why we should attack each other in a spiritual community. We are here for the same common goal. We're here to practice loving kindness. So we have that opportunity. So with a spiritual community, it allows us to open ourselves up without fear of being attacked. And it allows us to cultivate that quality human contact. And therefore, because of that it allows us to have satisfactory communication. When we have satisfactory communication, then when we open ourselves up, then it is positive emotions, right? Does it make sense? Right? So that's one major reason why people have blocked emotions, because of society. Society tells us you cannot do this, you cannot do that. In fact, when we were younger, we were told by our parents, don't do this, don't do that, So we were told since childhood not to do this, not to do that. In other words, not to express our emotions. So from childhood, we were already conditioned in our mind to not do this, to not do that. So we are conditioned to not express our emotions. Therefore, we have blocked emotions, right? So that's one major reason why positive energy is not available to us to feel happy, to feel joyful, right? So that's the first reason. Second reason is physiological factors, meaning our physical body, the brain. In this book, I really enjoyed this book. It's called The Brain That Changes Itself by Dr. Norman Deutsch. This book is very entertaining to read. And in the book, Dr. Norman Deutsch, he writes that in our brain we have so many activities because of neuronal connections, 精神单位, the neuronal connections, 根藤. There are so many connections that go on in our minds all the time. In fact, he said that thousands and thousands of brain activities are going on at the same time. That's why we have a lot of 妄想, 妄tưởng. We have so many thinking thoughts because we cannot control the neuronal connection. Because we have so many connections that we need forces to inhibit, to control, and to regulate our brains. If we have no way of controlling those neuronal connections, kinh thần, mấy cái thần kinh đơn vị, then we will not be able to control our emotions. We will not be able to control what we say and how we react. So it's good that we have such constraints of those. There's a lot of things going on, but nothing is displayed, right? We may have a lot of thoughts, but it doesn't mean that we say every single thought out to other people, right? Like you may look at a person who's asking your opinion of the dress. Of course, it looks ugly, but doesn't mean you should say it, right? So you have constraint. So that's a good constraint, that you don't say, man, that dress really looks ugly on you. So we don't say things like that, but we find a way, a nicer way, a more appropriate way to say, you may want to try something else. Let's compare. So that's one, is that we have constraints in our brain activities, and this is very healthy in a sense that it keeps us sane, organized, and in control of ourselves, so that we don't destroy ourselves. So you can see now how such physiological constraints helps us to maintain control and to avoid destroying ourselves, right? Because if you say whatever that is in your mind, you can easily ruin that relationship, right? You can lose a friend, you can lose a family member, right? They may get upset and they will never talk to you ever again, right? So most of our brain activities is inhibited for good reasons by nature. If we have a healthy body, we are not going to say things that are inappropriate. So that's good constraint, which is a very good thing to have. So that's why constraint, it may not allow us to say what's in our heart, but it's a good thing that we don't say whatever. But if you miss the opportunity to compliment somebody who's, let's say, a child who's doing good in school, who's doing well in school, and say, yes, good job, then that could give that child motivation to do even more, right? But you miss the opportunity to say, and you don't say anything when a child brings to you a good grade, but then you don't say anything, then you are not expressing your emotions. Then that's not a good thing either, right? Okay. A healthy, normal person will say the appropriate thing. Yes, that's a good job. When we lose that inhibition, that constraint, then unwanted drives and instincts emerge in full force, shaming us and devastating our relationships and families. Because you get upset and you hit somebody or you say the wrong thing, then you are not inhibiting yourself, and therefore you could ruin your relationship, right? So it's a good thing that we have such constraints. So we have the norms of society and the natural inhibitions and regulations of the brain activities, which eventually drive our thought, speech, and actions, including our feelings and emotions. So those constraints are necessary, but they are bad in a sense that they inhibit us from expressing what's in our heart. So what we want is to neutralize and keep the negative emotions under control, but we do want to bring out the healthy, the positive emotions, loving kindness, caring about each other. Those things are very healthy. So in a puja, Fa Hui, Pháp Hội, in a Dharma assembly, puja is Dharma assembly, helps us to cultivate and refine our emotional energies, to remove emotional blockage, and to prevent waste of emotional energy. So even if just a short period of a puja, a Dharma assembly, Pháp Hội, Fa Hui, even during a 30 minutes or 2 hours, whatever, during that brief period, you feel inspired, you feel very positive. So even if it's even a short duration, it is still very healthy. And many people feel inspired, relaxed, and even motivated after a puja. It is because their emotional energies have been released. Right? So it's not good to keep our emotions inside. It's healthy to express our emotions. But if we don't have real communication, we don't have quality contact with other people, whatever that we express will be negative. if we have quality contact, like we care about other people, for example, we practice loving kindness, từ bi, right? 慈悲, then whatever that we express ourselves will be of positivity. It will be positive. So emotional blockage comes through playing frustrations and disappointment. So you know that a person who is frustrated or disappointed, you know that there is blocked energy, right? You following me? There is something blocked that you're not expressing. That's why you feel frustrated, like, because you cannot express yourself in a way that you want to, clearly enough for the other person to understand. Therefore, there's no real communication. There's no real human contact to allow emotional blockage to be removed. So why do people have blocked emotions? Why is it that people cannot express themselves fully, satisfactorily? There are many reasons. One is because of absence of real communication that we just talked about. And it causes blocked emotions. That person doesn't know how to express their feelings, their emotion properly and clearly, because you want to try, you want to communicate. For example, let's say, for example, you're in a new city and you don't speak the language, and you try to ask for directions how to get your destination, and you trying to express using your own language, but the other person does not understand you, and it's like, what are you talking about? You're looking for food? No, I want to get to my destination. Oh, there's a good restaurant here. So you're not communicating. Therefore, it leads to frustration, right? So that's when we don't have real communication with the people that we are interacting with, then it leads to blocked emotions or frustrations or even explosion. If you cannot contain it, then it leads to explosion. You contain it because you don't want to feel frustrated, or at least you don't want your frustration to harm you, so you block your emotions. But at some point, that eventually it becomes an explosion if you can no longer contain your blocked emotions. So that's the first reason, because of lack of real communication, that people have blocked emotions. Second reason is because of a misunderstanding of Buddhist principles that can cause blocked emotions. For example, like detachment, buông xả, detachment, 放下, detachment, or the principle of emptiness, không, like không có cái gì hết, or emptiness. So if we have misunderstanding of Buddhist principles, it can lead to blocked emotions. For example, like detachment, one becomes isolated from themselves even, or from other people, because they want to be detached. They don't want to do anything. They want to buông xả hết, and so they want to be detached from the world because they have the wrong understanding of what detachment means. Because they want to avoid experience, for fear not to be attached to anything. They even want to detach from their families, from all the things they have, the possessions. But that's the wrong understanding of Buddhist principle. It is not giving up your family or relatives, but it's really, you can avoid those who don't share the same interests. That could ruin you, right? So it's not to give up your families, but just to pick out the ones that can help you. You can help them. So that's one. And the second is misunderstanding of the principle of emptiness, 空性, 空单. Because they end up losing the motivation to be diligent. There is no free flow of emotional energy. They become stagnant. They think that at the end, nothing exists, right? At the end, there is nothing. So really, why am I putting too much effort if at the end, there is nothing? Because everything is supposed to be empty. So because of that, they don't put forth their emotional energy and emotional expressions. So that's two reasons why, there are more, but there are primarily two reasons why people have blocked emotions. One is absence of real communication. They cannot express themselves. Two is wrong understanding of Buddhist principles, where it leads them to extreme view. Either annihilation, nothing exists, usually it leads to nothing exists, or attachment. But then they don't want to be attached, and so therefore they isolate themselves. All right. So how do we remove emotional blockage? So we know that's important to have emotion, because if you want to do something, you want to feel positive, inspired, you have to involve your emotions. If you want to continue, for example, even playing games, right? There is emotion involved. You love playing games. That's why you play games. You hate going to school. That's why you don't want to go to school. So there is emotion that pushes you to continue, right? So when you love playing games, there is emotions involved. Same thing if you want to study Buddhism, you need to involve your emotions. You need to involve your interests, your, what you like, or your love for it. So we know that emotion is very important because it keeps you to continue. It keeps your momentum. But we do have blockage sometimes. We cannot express ourselves. And because of the wrong misunderstanding, so social factors and physiological limitations, so those things inhibit our emotions. So now that we have emotional blockage, what do we do now? How do we overcome emotional blockage? Many things you can do, but here are a few options you can consider. One is to understand why we have frustration, which is emotional blockage, right? Why do we have frustrations? And if you investigate clearly, almost always that one is frustrated because of self-centeredness, one's ego, cái bản ngã, 我执, because of our egos being hurt, that we become frustrated or angry. Second, what we can do is to understand conditionality, pháp duyên khởi,緣起法, meaning understanding why things happen. We understand that nothing is permanent. Everything is forever changing, right? Vô thường, 无常. Even our emotional blockage is temporary. The frustration that we have is also temporary. But because we don't understand that, we think that our emotional blockage, our frustration exists, that it will last forever. That's why we feel threatened. That's why we attack, or we have this anger in us, because we want to preserve our existence. We want to preserve our ego, because we think that it is real, that frustration is real. So when we understand conditionality, we understand that things are changing, that our emotional blockage will become unblocked or will be removed. So we should not lose hope of recovery. So there's always hope, and there is always an opportunity to develop greater self-knowledge in every experience. When we interact with people, and if we pay close enough attention, we will understand ourselves more. We will understand what makes us happy. We will understand what makes us frustrated. And if we want to be happy, then we do more of those things. We want to be not frustrated, but then we do less of the things that will lead to frustration, like being egoistic. No, not everything that people say is about us, right? We don't have to always center ourselves in the spotlight. Not always everything is about us, so we don't have to worry about people attacking our ego or it's not always about us. So understanding conditionality, pháp duyên khởi,緣起法, is very important. So when we express our emotions, sometimes it is very healthy. Some people cry during meditation or chanting Amitabha, Amitabha, Niệm Phật, when they meditate or when they in Dharma assembly, Pháp hội, they cry. And that is a very positive thing that it happens because you are able to express your emotions. Another way to remove emotional blockage is to simply go and volunteer to cultivate merits. Tu phước, siêu phú, to cultivate merits, because when we go out and we help people, we are motivating our energy to be expressed. And so we don't allow our energy to be wasted or become stagnant. So go out and volunteer, help rebuild houses for the homeless, for example, or to feed the homeless, for example. So when we do that, we are communicating, right, with people. We are opening ourselves up with other people. And when we do that, when we have merits, phước báo, no, phú báo. When we have merits, we will feel confident. We will feel very positive. And so that's one way of overcoming emotional blockage and allowing our emotions to be expressed. The third thing that you can do is to avoid negativity, to avoid fault finding in others, to avoid looking at other people and find their weaknesses. That will make us negative, or it can make us blocked. So look for the positive things about people. Look at what they have that they can contribute. Even if the person who is good for no reason at all, you can still find at least one positive thing about that person. Even if that person is like the bottom of society, there is still one good thing that you can think about that person. That is, when that person breathes, his carbon dioxide is feeding the trees. Right? So even that person is good for nothing, he is still good for something. Right? So I was just kidding. But what I'm trying to say here is that we should always look for the positive side of people and avoid negativity because it can impact you. So again, puja, Pháp hội, right? Pháp hội, the puja Dharma assembly helps with emotional refinement and expression. It allows our positive energies to flow freely. So puja is very important. So we should not discard it. We should be part of it. But the Buddha is warning us that, if we cling to rites and rituals, those Dharma assemblies, then we are limiting ourselves because our practice becomes just a mechanical, just going through the motion. Trên hình thức, tu hành trên hình thức. And so we just go through the motion without thinking, why are we doing this? Why are we studying Buddhism? Why are we part of the Dharma assembly? Even though we are good in going to a Dharma assembly every week, but then yet we may feel happy, but it does not lead to spiritual liberation. Giải thoát, right? 解脱. That's why the second quality that the Buddha is telling us, that in order to become a sage, thánh nhân, right? 圣人, we have to first overcome self-view. We talked about this last time, which is to think that this physical body exists and then we become attached. So everything that we do is about this physical body. And when this physical body dies or it changes, we become dissatisfied because it's no longer what we are expecting it. So that's the first thing. The second thing is to overcome clinging to rites and rituals, where our practice now becomes mechanical, just going through the motion without thinking. We are not changing our consciousness. We are not changing our behavior. It's still the same. We go to a Dharma assembly, but we still get upset. We still feel greedy for things, material things. and therefore it does not help us. And if we want to overcome rites and rituals, we have to allow our emotions to carry us. And there are natural inhibitions, social factors, right? Society will restrict us. Our physiological limitations will restrict our emotions. So if we don't understand those things, then our emotions become blocked. And it will lead to frustration because we cannot express ourselves. So if we want to overcome those emotional blockages, then we have to, one, maintain human contact and establish real communication with other people. It allows us to exchange freely and allows our emotions to flow freely. And in a spiritual community like this, where we can open ourselves up, we can cultivate loving kindness without fear of being attacked. Well, we can safely practice loving kindness and develop our emotional energies. When we have enough emotional energies, when we have emotions, we can express our emotions. We will have emotional energy. We will have the drive to do the things that we want to do. We will feel happier because we can express ourselves, and we will be more motivated. And when we are more motivated, we will want to interact with people to establish real communication, to maintain that quality human contact. And so you can see the virtuous cycle continues. And that's how we grow from there, right? So if we don't have that, then we become stagnant. We cannot grow. And therefore, we will be stuck. And we will be unhappy with where we are. Okay, so the time is up for today's discussion. So next time, we will talk more about skeptical doubt. Because with doubt, you cannot overcome. Doubt, just a quick introductory explanation of this is doubt is not that you don't understand the principles, but it's about commitment. You are not committed because you have reservation. You don't know what's in that stream, right? Stream enter, nhập lưu, ru liu. To become a sage is that you are in the realm of sagehood, thánh nhân. You're in this realm of sagehood, but then you don't want to commit yourself to it. Therefore, you're likely to not be part of that stream, the water stream. Right? That's what the expression is. So we will go into the details of what this doubt is and how to overcome it. And so hopefully through this doubt, we should appreciate the fact that we have a good opportunity to become sages. It's not a dream, but it is reality, right? And that's what, if we follow this formula, the 3 qualities that we cultivate, developed, it is very possible in this lifetime that we can at least enter the realm of sages, the sagehood. Once we're in the realm of sagehood, it is guaranteed forever that we will never encounter suffering again. So that's the benefit of entering the realm of sagehood.